Welcome everybody to another Tasting Room Conversations. I'm really excited to be here as somebody who has, as you guys know, been born and raised on this side of the river, the Brewer side of the river. Went to Orrington Brewer High School. It's exciting for me to be here with some Brewer's finest. So we have Jason Moffett, the Public Safety Director. We have Tom Tardif, Corporal with the force, and Zach Karen, who's also Corporal with Brewer Police Department. We're really excited to be here. I think a lot of interesting conversations in the lead up to this. A lot about beer. You know, we got you guys what you're looking for. You know, that's pretty good. A couple of these guys, I'm not going to tell you who might actually be Mug Club members as well. I mean, you never know. Maybe we can get all of them to be before the end of our conversations. Wink, wink. But you know, I really would love to just kind of have this conversation, get into a little bit of what's going on at Brewer, because you guys have a very unique perspective on that. You know, I see it from economic development perspective and those sorts of things. I see it as somebody who lives in Brewer, but you guys see sort of all facets of it. You know, you see the ups and the downs and those sorts of things. But then also, I think there's been, particularly in the last few years, a real, not always positive focus and shift on some interaction stuff with police officers, and I think you guys, particularly in Brewer, are doing a fantastic job in changing that conversation and really engaging in the community. So how are you guys doing that? How are you creating a community where, at least for me, it might be because I know a bunch of you guys, but I wave, I say hi, you guys are engaged, my kids see you guys as friends and positives and all that sort of stuff. So throw it out to you guys, you can all kind of touch on it. What do you do? Because I know it's intentional.
I think it starts fairly young. Right at the school, for instance, we have an SRO in both schools.
Yeah.
So in each school, so that's a great tool to get to know the kids.
Yeah.
They get to see police officers in a completely different light than they see on TV.
Yep.
You know, sometimes they're helping across the street. And,
Yeah.
You know, it just gives a very, very unique perspective to them.
Right.
And we've kind of, with the younger ones, we've even kind of blossomed up from there, and we have a summer camp now.
Yep.
2-week public safety
Oh,
camps,
cool.
both police and fire.
All right. Tell me about. I didn't know that. Tell me about that. So this summer camp for you. What does that look like? What do they do? Is this for kids who are thinking about being involved in these professions, or is it just anybody can come check it out?
Both. You know, sometimes they're just curious. For some of them, it's just a cool thing to do, something different for a week. But they get to spend an entire week with our officers, a number of different officers. And,
Cool.
Other agencies too bring in the warden service and things like that, and they get to do everything from you know, physical fitness, run obstacle courses to all kinds of things. We even let them run the ladder truck, the firefighters.
Oh, nice.
So
Yeah.
If you're 10 years old and you're running a ladder truck,
That's about as cool as it gets. I mean, not for nothing, but as a 36-year-old who's never run the truck, if I got to run it, it would be about the coolest thing for a minute. You know, like to all of our friends in the fire department, I'm not saying your job's all fun, but running that for the first time is probably pretty cool.
I'm sorry, but we capped the entrance. Incoming freshmen.
All right.
All
right. That's awesome. That's awesome. So the SRO program as well, the Student School Resource Officer. That's a cool position, I think. My wife's a teacher. I taught at the high school level for a little while. And, elaborate a little bit on that, because the assumption might be that position is there as an authoritative position, and it can be if it needs to be. But from my experience, at least in the way Brewer's doing it, that school resource officer is there interacting and engaging, and there's certainly the safety aspect of it. There is sometimes there are certainly, when I was teaching at the high school level, there were times where, unfortunately, a student went astray. The officer needed to be involved in that sort of realm. But what's the perspective? What's the mentality? What's the goal with that resource officer?
Well, there's a lot of interaction, and it's also good to have somebody there with authority that someone could come to rather than a teacher or another peer. And they have that trust and that relationship, so they can go to them with different problems they're having or ideas they have to make the school safer.
Yeah.
And they're not just sitting at a desk in school. They're out teaching classes. They're helping out with different resources. Obviously, the school crossing zones is a big deal.
Yeah.
Mornings and afternoons for arrivals and dismissals. So they're kind of doing a lot of things at once.
Right.
It's a really cool program to have.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I always saw it as a positive, and for me, I was near the beginning as a student at Brewer High School. I was near the beginning of the school resource officer being involved in the school, and I think, from my perspective, it was a real good positive for the students too. I think everybody had a really nice, generally a really nice sort of good vibe with the police officer. It was somebody that could really be, positive for a lot of reasons. I think that's really cool.
Yeah, I think it just gets those first interactions with the police positive.
Yeah.
Because oftentimes when the police are called, unfortunately, it's probably one of the worst days of their lives.
Yeah.
Or, someone's hurt, and if you have those positive interactions early on, it's just going to build that relationship and make it a lot easier for them to get through that hard time.
We met a week or so ago and kind of just discussed the foundation of what because obviously what you guys do has a level of some lines that we don't want to cross, we can't cross. I mean, there are things that you see that you can't discuss, and so we want to make sure we were doing that. But one of the things that in that conversation I thought was really interesting is I can really see how there's some clear interactions and plays in what I do and what you guys do. And you guys get all of the worst of it in a lot of ways. So what I mean by that is, particularly on the restaurant side, but definitely the beer side too, it's about relationships and it's customer service. And in a funny way, I mean, you guys are in a scenario where you're serving the public in a customer service scenario, but you're right, Zach, in that most people don't pick up the phone and call the police at their best moment. It's not like we're coming to celebrate an anniversary today. It's I need some help. And so that must be somewhat taxing, to be running into those things. And the school resource officer is really cool, but another program that I think is neat that you guys are involved with is the Coffee with Cops. Because again, it gives you that opportunity to let's engage with the public on a bigger level. That's not when you need me, when you call me, but hey, let's get to know you. Let's build a bridge here. Tell me about the Coffee with Cops.
I think the strength in that is it's very informal and unstructured.
Yeah.
So there are no agendas or anything like that. We just, when we advertise it, it's literally Coffee with Cop. Next week, for instance, we're having one upcoming soon at Tim Hortons.
Cool.
And I'll let you know when that's coming.
Okay, great.
And, but literally, people just come in and they sit down and have coffee with police officers, and whatever they want to talk about is cool with us.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And, just gives them a chance to interact with us on a different level, personal level.
When you do this, you have a lot of people showing up. I mean, has it been? I'm sure some are bigger than others.
Yeah, it's always been a good turnout, and it gives people the opportunity to bring things up where they didn't really want to pick up a phone call and make that complaint.
Right.
Whether it's a parking issue or just something going on in the neighborhood that they didn't want to, bother us by calling us. Which really people should be able to interact with us for anything, but it's a more relaxed, informal, like Chief said, of just talking to us, and if something comes up they think of, they can just mention it, and it's kind of low key and just an idea.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Like I said, I love the idea of the proactive approach that you guys are putting into, and I think our community is really benefiting from it. Over the last few years, particularly, I mean, I know you guys are excited about, as we are, and I really want to kind of use this as a platform to encourage our community to engage with the Riverwalk, because that's been a lot of effort. And you guys, we were talking about that. What a cool place. You guys are patrolling it well. It's safe. People sometimes have a mentality of, heading down to the river being, Bangor and Brewer, both sides of the river, at least back in the past had a rap.
Yeah.
It had a reputation. Tell me about transforming that a little bit and what you guys see for those positives.
First of all, I mean, the design itself is just a beautiful place. It's a great place. I mean, it's the type of place that they're still working on now. I mean, they're fine-tuning it. People, we're down there every day.
Yeah.
I go every day, do one foot patrol, and it's amazing how many people stop and talk to you.
That's a good foot patrol.
It is.
Go on.
I do it when I want to feel better.
Right.
When I hear some positive people, I get down there and
Awesome.
tell us how great of a job we did.
Oh, good.
How they like the presence, they like the cameras.
Yeah.
I think these guys will tell you the same thing.
Yeah, and if you haven't been, definitely check out the Riverwalk. They just completed phase 2, and as Chief said, they're working on it. Today they had a portion of it shut down. There were some trees, but it saved a lot.
Okay.
It's beautiful, and it's safe, and we're down there all the time just checking it out.
Businesses are growing up around it. It's really becoming a positive. And it's a place where for me, my wife and kids, particularly in the summer. Summer's our busy season. I'm working crazy in the summer months, and it's busy in the winter, but not as busy. And oftentimes Lindsay will say, "I'm going down to the waterfront with the kids," and it's a great place that they can go out and go for a walk and be out there. And there's 0% that I am concerned about them being out there. It's it's because you guys have a presence, because it's been built so well, because it's well lit. We've been out there after dark too. It's a cool place. It's a safe place, and it's awesome. I want to shift a little bit. There's a lot of great stuff going on. There's a lot of really good stuff going on in Brewer, but you guys are also seeing some tough things every day. It's not all roses. I think we should really be cognizant of the fact that it's not. That there's a lot of tough stuff going on, and I know there's some challenges. What are some of the bigger challenges that you see that are there today that you're working towards, and the next sort of proactive kind of thing to build our community in the right direction?
We touched on it a little bit earlier, but what I was going to say is that we're good at in Brewer is that when someone calls us, they're usually having a crisis.
Yeah.
And whether it's a small crisis or a big crisis, nonetheless, it's a crisis to them.
Yeah.
So when we respond to that call for service or for crisis, a challenge that we have, and I think that we're doing a really good job at, is building a quick and tactfully well-maintained relationship with that person, so that they feel comfortable enough, telling us what's going on, so we can help with their concern, we can take care of the problem at hand. And I think that we're really good as a department at making and maintaining that relationship with them, when they are in a crisis.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's just,
funny crisis scenario. I shared this story with you guys earlier. I live on a main drag in Brewer, and there are a lot of people walking around. And one night I made the mistake of not locking my truck, and it became a delightful place for a transient to spend the night, and didn't have much anything in it. They stole my gym bag, and it was one of those. I do have to say that one of the things that really stuck out to me it was my fault in a lot of ways, because I left my truck on. I know people are going by. I know there are, people in our community that are going to take advantage of those scenarios. And I called with the mentality of, hey, I need to report this more than anything. It's a gym bag. I'm not worried about my sneakers. But not only was the response quick, but it was thorough, and there was follow up, and it was a really, for me, a good experience, and a very interesting outcome. We don't need to get into, but it all worked out. I don't have my shoes back, nor do I really want them back.
I was there.
Yeah, because the dude walked back by my house wearing my thing, which was intriguing. It was really a weird thing. But you know, for me, I've lived in Brewer. I lived in Orrington growing up through high school. Went away to college at UMaine, and I've lived in Brewer really since my junior year in college, ever since. And that's the worst experience I've had in Brewer. Is someone stole my sneakers. So it's kudos to you guys on really doing a great job. And yes, the reality is there are people who have way worse experiences than that in Brewer, and there are always going to be people who make poor choices and make the wrong decision. And those are tough days that nobody wants to be a part of. But you guys have done a great job in creating a scenario in Brewer where my 12-year-old son can ride his bike to school, and I feel okay about it. I didn't love it the first time because the dad let their kid go, but so it's awesome. I'd like to get a little bit on the personal level right now, and particularly in this day and age, where I don't really feel like anything's worse than it's ever been. I think it's different than it's been, and things are what they are. But there is certainly a segment of our population that doesn't have what I would say is a proper respect for police officers and the job that you do. What got you into this? I'd love to hear from each of you. Like, why? Zach's story I know a little bit, just because for those of you who don't know Zach was a server at the pub for a while, and was a young guy that you were talking about being a police officer from high school, like
long time.
What gets you into it?
Well, just to fill in the gaps, I did start at the pub back in 2009, I believe, and I was a busboy on the weekends, and then I worked my way up to.
I tried to fire him many times.
Tried.
We just couldn't make it stick.
Yeah. Chief has to, but we have a union now, so he's stuck with me. No, so so kind of a dark note, but yeah, in high school, my father actually was hurt in an accident at his workplace. He worked on construction equipment, and the bucket of front loader actually fell on his head.
Wow.
And put him in the hospital for a long time, and we were actually under the impression at first that he was not going to make it. But he is alive and well these days. But I decided at that point in my life, I was a freshman in high school, I believe, that I wanted to do something to kind of pay back almost. I feel like I owe some rent because my father, I'm very lucky to have my father today. So if I have the opportunity to, save someone else's life or, be there for someone when they're in that hard time, I feel like I need to do that. So that's really what, drew my interest into law enforcement, and that's kind of like my passion. So
cool. Yeah, and it has been. I know from you. I mean, for a long time, and it was cool to see. We deal with a lot of young people coming through the ranks of the pub, and a lot of good kids, but kids will be kids to an extent, and there's a level of freedom that some of them push the boundaries on. And Zach was always that kid that was going to be straight shooter, and I'm not just saying this because Chief's here. In fact, I'd be more apt to crap on you because he's here. But that's cool. That's an interesting story. You guys, what drew you to this profession?
Well, my uncle was a game warden. So growing up, and he was a warden in the 70s and 80s and into the 90s. So some really cool stories about just going out without a radio, without cell phones, and just dealing with guys with guns. And you walk in the woods, and that's what you're looking for. there's people doing the wrong thing with a firearm.
Yeah.
And some really cool stories came of that. And it just, the law enforcement thing always piqued my interest. And I followed it through high school and kept that, as straight edge as I could.
Yep.
And it all worked out. And I grew up in this area, and Brewer was always attracted to me.
Yeah.
Luckily, fortunately enough, I was able to come in and work my way up through. So
Awesome. Huh, that's cool.
I grew up in a small town down east, Woodland, the real Woodland, by the way, otherwise known as Baileyville. And it was funny, my brother from a young age wanted to be a cop.
Yeah.
And I didn't really have any interest in it. I was in college, didn't know what really I wanted to do at that point, and he,
It was the next step.
it was the next step.
So
For a
many
short-
kids do that.
For a
Yeah,
short
yeah.
time, he lived in the dorm next door.
Yep.
And he was in the law enforcement program and taking the, what was back then, the 100 hours. At that time, you could take 100 hours of training and be literally certified.
Wow.
To work the road as a
All right.
part-time
All
officer.
right. Yeah.
Which was a little scary in
Yeah,
itself, but
yeah.
things have changed now.
Well, the job has changed too, I'm sure.
The job has changed too. And so he talked me into going to one of his 100 hours course classes. And, I remember this class was taught by a former detective from Bangor PD that was talking about homicides and all these really, really interesting investigations. And I was kind of intrigued. I went on a ride along with the sheriff's deputy that my wife and her cousin used to basically babysit as a child.
Okay.
And that's how I got to know him. And
Yeah.
I went out with him twice and I was hooked after that. I'm like, because I was fascinated. There was way, way, way more to the job than I ever thought it was. There was a lot more to go. It would be challenging, a bit scary at times, and I was hooked.
Yeah.
That's the end of it. I ended up going forward at that point.
Yeah. I'm sure like every job, there are days that are monotonous, boring, not much going on. But is there a typical day?
those days you're talking about is the ones that we look forward to.
Yeah, right?
It's not
Yeah.
always like that.
Yeah. Because you do. I mean, as much as we want to talk about Brewer being a community that is a great community, and it is, you guys are going out there and for sure legit putting your life on the line.
Well,
You never know. You never know who's gonna do something stupid. You never know what sort of scenario you're gonna walk into. Even in just protecting somebody, even if it's not an intentional endeavor. I mean, I think about the accidents that happen and pulling over a vehicle for a minor traffic violation can end up in. It's not the safest place to stand. It's not the easiest thing to do. There's a lot of protocol. Even if everybody's doing fine and somebody was just driving a few miles per hour with a speed limit, so I would imagine those easy days are real delightful and well deserved. But anything no normal. I mean, I would imagine it's.
This is kind of anecdotal. It seems like when I first started, way back in those days, we had a lot more slow days.
Yeah.
And then it's just like they stopped. Winters used to be slow.
Yeah.
Not even slow in the winter anymore. I mean, it's in the, I think part of it is just the area is growing, even though not necessarily in population, the daytime population of Brewer alone. In Bangor, it shoots through the roof. You have Route 9, all the traffic, you have Maritimes down east.
Yeah.
Route 1A, right now, we're paying probably 35,000 cars a day.
Yeah.
Going out of Wilson Street. And then you have, so it's just all these people coming into town at the same time. Things are bound to happen with that many people in one place.
Oh yeah. Even if everybody has the best of intentions,
Yeah.
things are going to happen. Yeah.
And one thing I was going to say is that we're not call takers, so we don't just sit and wait for the radio to go off.
Right.
We're out there proactive in charging forward. So when there is a lull in the action, we're stopping cars. We're doing checks on people who have conditions that they shouldn't be doing certain things.
Yeah.
So we're not just looking for the bad guys all the time, but we're out stopping by the shops,
Yeah.
stopping by the stores, talking to business
Yeah.
owners. Just seeing if there's an issue in the area.
You guys certainly keep a very, very public profile, and I think that's key to the success that we see in the amount that I feel safe in our town. The ability to know that if you drive through Brewer, you're pretty likely going to see one of you guys on patrol somewhere doing something, but in the same regard, I don't feel like we're in a community where I know for sure you're not out there looking for me to do something wrong. You know, you're not sitting outside my door trying to track me out, trying to find that I've done something wrong. You're out there looking and seeing, and if somebody's doing something that's unsafe, somebody doing something that's not positive, you'll intervene. But yeah, I fully trust and believe. But sometimes people with the mentality of the police are out to get me, it's like, well, I'm guessing they'd rather not get you, you know?
Yeah.
I'm guessing they'd rather not have to knock on your door, rather not have to pull you over. Yeah, it's wild, but it's pretty awesome.
I think part of the reason that we had that, the perception of safety is huge, hugely important. I didn't realize that early on in my career, but I do now. You know, citizens, if you, and even the things that a lot of us may look at as small, you know, a lot of people in law enforcement feel you know, just basic disorderly conduct, people being drunk and disorderly on the streets. Well, if you live on that street and it's going on all the time, you don't want to send your kids out in the park because you're freaked out by that.
Right.
So, I mean, we take a really proactive approach in keeping our neighborhood safe, and particularly when it comes to drug trafficking.
Yeah.
That's the stuff we have zero tolerance for, and this attitude comes from both us, me personally, and chiefs before me.
Yeah.
It's always been.
And I would say, and I want to be very careful with this because, you know, you mentioned the drug issue, and I think there is a real drug issue in our area. I think it's something that is really a black eye in a great part of the world. But the other thing that I would say about it is it's a real tough part about what you guys have to deal with. But again, going back to just a little bit of praise, I feel like if you're not involved in drug trafficking, if you're not buying drugs from drug dealers, if you're not, the one caveat to this is if you're unfortunate enough to live next to this interaction, you have no control over it. But if you don't happen to live next to this scenario, you guys are presenting a community that's, you're not going to typically run into an issue inadvertently. I don't feel like, you know, Lindsay and I will see it from time to time. My wife Lindsay and I will see it, and it runs a pretty typical standard fare of you'll see one of the Brewer cars go, you'll see the next Brewer car or two go, and then you start seeing the big blacked out SUVs with blue lights go, and you're like, well, they found a meth lab, or they found a drug dealer, or something's going on. And your response on those things is so quick and so direct. But to the people who look at it and say, well, the community has these issues, sure, there's a segment of our community that has drug issues, but I think you guys have done a really good job in responding well. And also, I don't feel like there's no drug dealer that's out to get me, personally. And so the best advice I can give to everybody is just don't do drugs.
There you go.
How's that sound? Go get in that world. For a while, I had a list of you know, places not to go in the Brewer area, and honestly, that list is getting smaller, and it's now more things. Don't do these things in Brewer. You know, most everywhere is pretty safe, pretty good, and there's some bad people. You know, and it's wild.
Well, the community, especially when you have the neighborhood, like I'm thinking of one particular area last summer, we did have an issue with people guy dealing drugs, a lot of nonsense going on.
Yeah.
But the neighborhood, you know, they really came together, and they came and talked to us, and this is what's going on. We dealt with the issue.
Yeah. And I feel like that's happening more and more and more.
It is.
You know, people are really, a lot of people in the Brewer area have decided that we're going to take our community back, and not in some politically charged or anything, but just there are certain things that we're not going to tolerate.
Right.
And I think, again, we feel like on both sides of the river, and we're really in the whole area, we've got law enforcement officers that are there to help us and support us, and really bring us to a positive resolution in those tough times and those moments. We're having a beer. Let's stop talking shop for a little bit. You know, we're sitting here on a beautiful day. Maine this time of year is wonderful and delightful. When you're not on duty, what keeps you excited in this great state of ours? What are you all about? What are you guys into?
Go ahead, Zach. Well, I just got back from a camping trip up at
Nice.
Joe Mary Lake.
All right.
And I had a blast, even though it rained.
Catch anything?
No. It was actually pretty poor weather.
Okay.
But got away, no cell phone reception, so
Isn't
that's
that
always
delightful?
yeah.
Yeah.
It's the best.
Yeah.
I love it. Nobody can call me into work. Right?
Yeah. Ooh. I saw that.
And then
Cool.
me and my wife, we like to travel the world too, so we go on a lot of cruises, and we've been down to the Panama Canal and
Oh, that's cool.
all through the Caribbean. So
No kids yet.
no kids.
Yeah, I know, right?
Yeah, we're smart.
Yeah. Well, I think you're the only one to take over that ability right now. Awesome. Yeah.
Well, I mean, obviously in our line of work, we cherish our time off,
Mm.
you know. So what I do is I just spend as much time as I can with my family. You know, I have 2 kids and my wife, and we try to do a lot. We do a lot of local stuff. We like to stay in the area. I just bought a Jeep, so we'll take a Jeep ride as a family down to Belfast, Bar Harbor. Yeah.
I like it.
But you know, I like to fish, ice fishing and just lake fishing and being out on a boat somewhere, just like Zach said, you know, cell service the better and just
quiet.
just quiet and relax and just, you know,
Awesome.
just enjoy the time.
There's so much of that. There's so much of that to be done in Maine, you know, and I, for me personally, when I think about like time off, I'm in my backyard or I'm heading somewhere north, just to be quiet still. Yeah, it's great.
I like the outdoors.
Yeah.
Really, and my entire family does. For
Awesome.
And, I like to hike, some fishing. Love being on the water. I could care less about fishing, not catching a fish, whatever. I just like being out there.
Yeah.
We like to camp. Really, just spending a lot of family time.
Yeah.
That's the nice thing. We do a lot together as a family. Really, my wife and I have tried to make that a priority over the years. We've been pretty lucky with that.
Awesome. Well, guys, I really appreciate the time. You know, on these tasting room conversations, we spend a lot of time with creative people, with crafters, with artists, with business owners, and those sorts of things. And this is a really cool conversation to have, but also because I want to say thank you to the work that you guys are doing. Because again, the reality is we have a lot of people in our communities that support all of those things and the work that you guys do. All the men and women in the police forces in our communities and an overwhelming majority of like law enforcement officers throughout the country and throughout the world. You provide a foundation for us to be able to do what we do. So I'm glad that I could pour you a beer today and say thanks for the work that you're doing and shining a light on it. Yeah,
Thank you.
Well, definitely. And if you're in Brewer and you see one of these guys or any of their colleagues, give away a from there. Through and through, a lot of really good folks. I feel like it's guys, cheers.
Thank you.